Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Starting Nowhere. Today, my guest is a family friend that I haven't spoken to in over 10 years. Her name is Cyndi Mayer, and I talked to her about her consulting business, how life in the pandemic is, and really how likely she is to be a suspect of murdering her husband. Please stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. We have Miss Cyndi here. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit because obviously we go way back, so I don't want to step on any toes, and I'll let you introduce yourself. I don't want to give too much background on you.
Okay, well, I'm Cyndi Mayer, and I live in New Jersey. I have known you, Brandon, for almost all your life, probably since you were very young. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually from New Jersey, but I used to live in Ohio, which is where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And or I met your mother, and we became very, very good friends. And we hung out a lot, and my kids and you and your siblings were very close, and that's where I am today. I recently started my own business. It's called Cyndi Mayer Consulting, and I do grant writing and develop promotional materials and white papers and any type of marketing materials that companies need and want to use to advance their business and their mission and vision and goals. And yeah, so that's what I do. That's who I am.
Awesome. Thank you. I do want to circle back to your business probably here in a little bit. But before that, I want to stay on the personal tip for a second. When do you think the last time you and I actually spoke was? By my estimate, it's been at least 10 to 15 years probably or something. I can't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's a very good question. It has to be, I want to say, was it early high school?
It might be, but to be honest, I don't remember much of the time.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it had to be around that time, maybe early high school for you.
okay, that makes sense. So that just to date myself really quick for everybody who's listening, who will be listening, I should say, that's probably 17 years ago. Then I think now I'm about 17-year mark from high school. So okay, that makes sense. That seems to be in line with what I thought. I ran into Ray.
Brandon, you know, you're making me feel very old with all this. Trying to recall the years and everything.
Well, the good news, especially for you and my mother both, is that we're not that far apart in age. So even though it was 17 years ago, that's not really that telling of either of our ages, I don't think. Well, mine probably because I can figure out high school, but we're still pretty close together in age. So that gap has not grown.
Right.
So
the great thing is that your mother used to give me all of you guys' hand-me-downs. So my kids, didn't have to shop for a very long time, especially for Ray, my son. He got like all your hand-me-downs as a kid.
Yeah, and Ray's kind of told me that some of the reasons he picked up skateboarding and things like that were because of me, which is hilarious to hear because I was never good at it. He's far better than I ever was at it, and he stayed with it a lot longer as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, because I ran into Ray a couple years back in New York City when I went to visit for the first time, I think before I deployed for the second time. So got to run into Ray, and obviously he's grown up a lot, just had a baby and everything. So, I mean,
yes,
you want to talk about feeling old, the little kid who we used to kick around with, I used to kick around with, now has a kid, you know what I mean? So
I know. How about that? It amazes me every single day. And in fact, they were here this past weekend, as you know, with the baby, and it was nice. Interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but Ray suffers from epilepsy.
I did not know that.
And he actually had a seizure this weekend. It was the first time that I'd seen it because he didn't have this condition until probably about maybe 10 years ago it started. And anyway, so it was a very trying weekend, to say the least. But, we got to spend time together, and I got to spend time with the baby. So
well,
I'm happy.
I think I turned it the wrong way. I'm getting a lot of feedback on your end. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, other than the the epileptic seizure. I'm hoping that the spending the time with the grandkid was good. So I'm taking it because of your tone that Ray is doing okay now.
Yes, he is doing fine.
Good.
Hmm.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. So how did that diagnosis process, I guess, kind of go? I don't honestly myself know anyone with epilepsy. So how did he kind of discover that he had it? If you're okay, come talking about that, of course.
Yeah, of course. So actually, he was living in New York and working at the airport. And what happened? He was out with friends and had what appeared to them to be a seizure. So they got him to the hospital. So I drove over there to Queens, New York, to the hospital. And they didn't really diagnose him, but they just said he had a seizure, and that was the start of it. And so then from there, he had probably a seizure it started to get a little more frequent, not like people that suffer from it in a more frequent, occurrence, but he started to get them like maybe once every 2 year, no, 2 or 3 times a year. Anyway, we finally got him on medication and it has kind of leveled out. So this was the first seizure that he had in a year. And we found out that he had run out of his medication 2 days before. So I'm hoping that that might have been the problem. And he's, refilled his prescription. He's back on the meds, and I'm hoping that we will go a very long stretch without another seizure, if not forever. Because it's a scary thing.
Absolutely. Having again only seen them in by recording and everything, and never seeing them in person, I can only imagine the feeling you would have seeing especially a loved one, not just even a stranger. I would imagine would be terrifying, but a loved one especially,
Sure.
and not really being able to do too much in that moment, to kind of help them. That's
Yeah,
got to be terrifying.
it was terrifying. And I was actually holding the baby, and I just kind of like threw him to his mother and said, "Take the baby," and rushed to help him. But anyway, he is doing well. He's doing better. I saw him yesterday, briefly, and he was with the baby, and it was a very sweet moment, and he was better, and so things are good. Can't complain.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Again, like I said, I always hope the best for Ray. Even though as a kid, I gave him a lot of crap. That's my job, but he's a good dude.
Yeah, it was.
So I'll make sure that I start that up again here soon. I'll reach out to him just to give him crap. That's the only way I show my affection for the most part is by talking crap to people.
Awesome. He needs it.
That's great. So other than the big grandchild coming into the world and everything like that, how's your 2020 been? I know it's been a year of adjustment for all of us, but just interested to see how it's been for you.
2020 has been a very difficult year. Obviously for everyone. For me, it's presented some significant challenges, but also some opportunities. As far as the opportunities, it really has helped my business grow because the bulk of my business is grant writing, and funding is changing, and the way people raise money and secure funds is changing, and so people are looking for assistance in grant writing to kind of pick up the slack of some of the things that they couldn't do throughout the year. For example, a lot of charities will do fundraising events. Well, they couldn't do that in 2020, right? Because we were on lockdown and we're still kind of navigating through this world and still social distancing. So there are nonprofits that really couldn't do their typical fundraising activities for the year. So I'm trying to help them recoup some of those funds via grant funds. And so that, obviously, unfortunately has offered, an opportunity for me to grow my business. And that's exactly what's happening. The challenges have been, the isolation, the fear, Yeah, I was a bit of a germaphobe before the pandemic, and so it's just made it 10 times worse. Um, and it's really scary. We were planning to actually, we had planned to go to Orlando, Florida, to a friend's wedding reception, and then we were going to take a week and drive out to the west coast of Florida and have our vacation. And my husband and I, and we canceled that. We're still going to Florida against my better judgment, but we're still going for 3 days for the reception, and then we're coming right back home. So, there are a lot of things like that that had to change for us. My face-to-face communications, couldn't do that anymore. At the beginning of the year, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this, but I'm also an adjunct professor at a local community college. And, we had to very quickly adjust to an online platform. And I think that was a big change, not only for me, but for the students. And, the way I teach, and I could tell it was difficult for them. It was, certainly a challenge for me and an adjustment for me. So, there have been a lot of changes like that. And personally, I don't know if are familiar with Michelle Obama's podcast, and she talked about having, what does she call it? Low-level depression, just from the isolation and the the trauma this crisis has brought to people. And I'd have to agree with that. I definitely experienced some times of, where it's it's troublesome, more so than any other crisis that I've had to deal with in my lifetime.
Absolutely. I don't think, in some sense, it wouldn't make sense if we were able to go through what we've gone through this year and not feel something from it.
Yeah.
If you're able to do that drastic of an adjustment to your lifestyle and experience nothing, you're either one of the most well-balanced people, or the more likely outcome is that your life was already in disarray and you were able to kind of keep going because of that. So I can't say that I'm intimately familiar with Michelle Obama's podcast. I know that my girlfriend's been very excited when she saw it pop up on Spotify. I have to admit, one of the weirdest things that I've done since I stopped having a commute, because as we were kind of talking about before we started, I've been working home for over a year now. I used to listen to podcasts on my commute. Now that I have no commute, my podcast listening went down like 100%. I barely touch on them. It's because I can't sit still for, the hour to 2 to 3, whatever it was anymore when I was listening to the podcast. So I have not touched upon that yet. I think I do need to journey back into the land of podcasts. I've been missing out on a lot of stuff, obviously. So.
Yeah, no, and I feel you on that. And I used to get a lot of my news from morning shows during my commute and, on my way home. And I don't have that anymore. So I almost feel a lot of times like I'm out of touch. I try to stay up on, the regular news. But, there's like entertainment news and, cultural things that are going on that I'm not privy to because I'm not listening to, the shows that I used to listen to on my commute to work. So, yeah,
absolutely.
I can definitely relate.
And one of the things that I think that is kind of missing in today's society is a news aggregator. There used to be, again, to date myself, Yahoo used to be that news aggregator. And I think with the rise of social media, a lot of times we've gotten to aggregation of news by our friend. But the problem with that is I think what's interesting to us usually is the very same thing time in and time out. And so you're not getting a diversified news set like we used to from these other news aggregators. But again, now that we're learning all this stuff about how these algorithms are written and how they're biased in themselves because the people who wrote them were biased, I'm also interested to see how the algorithm would even work anymore, or go on a news aggregator would work anymore, because most of the ones I'm aware of, Flipboard and just some of the old ones, even I think Google has its own, they just go off of what you like. So it just creates your own echo chamber again, instead of getting a diversified news set like you would from a let's go way back, right? A newspaper, the newspaper just reported everything and you kind of picked out what you actually were interested in reading, but it had it all available if you wanted
Mhm.
to. I don't know that exists
Right.
anymore.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I spent the afternoon at my mother's house and they still get the daily newspaper.
That's awesome.
It was kind of funny. I wanted to sit down and read it, but I had other things that I was doing while I was there. But yeah, they still do that. So it is definitely a dying breed. Social media, I don't trust the information there. So
Mhm.
I, there's fake news, if you will. And so I really try to avoid getting my information from social media.
Mhm.
But sometimes, especially in these times, it's almost like inevitable,
Yeah.
because you're on social media just by default every day anyway, right? So
Yeah.
I try not to take what's on social media for gospel and either do my research myself or seek out news outlets that I trust for giving me appropriate and fact-checked information.
I think with social media in particular, but a lot of different news sources, it should just be used as a jumping off point. Because
Yeah,
again, with how powerful Google is, I think you look at something, a story that anybody has shared and go, that's interesting, or that doesn't look right, or whatever it is. And then you go and you do a little bit, I don't want to call it a deep dive because it's not. We're Googling and then we're reading
right.
one article, but you should just look a little bit beyond whatever they have chosen to share. And it's not even because your friends or my friends for that matter are bad at sharing and bad at being discerning with information. It's just because sometimes you need to get a full perspective of it. And that's something I've actually been kind of talking about lately with people is that we have a lot of this politicized news that people talk about, liberal bias in the mainstream media. Then you have Fox News and all this stuff. I think it's concerning for me that we are comfortable with that being the case. Not that there is
Yeah,
a liberal media bias, or that Fox News exists or anything, but the fact that we have allowed ourselves to create these echo chambers of news sources instead of having, let's say, a balanced news set. Why this would be a really funny show, I feel like, but Bill O'Reilly next to Anderson Cooper. There's your balance. You know what I mean? Let them just
yeah, right.
go back and forth and have that be how you present the news. I think that's realistically how you'd get a more complete perspective, or at least because of the two polar opposites they would present, you could go, all right, well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And now I can actually feel better about what I'm learning instead of getting a singular view of whatever the story is.
Yeah, so it's funny that you say that because I do try to balance where I get my news from. I try to listen to both Fox and CNN and other news outlets
Mm-hmm.
because I want to get a wide perspective of what, the information that's being presented. And I agree with you. The truth has to be somewhere in the middle. And I think I have enough common sense and life history to be able to make that discern, what's fact and what's fiction. And I do my own research as well. But it is nice to get different perspectives because when you just listen to one, that's all you get.
Mm-hmm.
You're only getting their view, and I need a little more than that, especially before I make very important decisions about my life and my world and the people I love that are in it.
I think that's how I actually manage my friends list. There's definitely, and some of them may see this and start questioning, but there are people on my friends list that I keep around solely because I disagree with them, solely because I know that they're going to
Mm,
share information that is completely polar opposite to my own information set or personal beliefs. And I think it's
mhm,
very good to kind of keep that information coming into my face as well, not only because it shows a different perspective, but it also lets me know what is the counter perspective to what I do personally believe. Why do they
right.
believe what they believe and where do they come from? And again, on any side of any issue, you're going to have zealots, you're going to have people who just don't know and just feel and they run with that.
Mhm,
But I think it's
mhm,
also, there are people that I disagree with on a fundamental basis that are well informed about the issue. They're well informed about why
mhm,
they feel the way they feel. And I can respect that, even if I don't disagree with, even if I don't agree with them. And so I keep them on my Facebook simply because of that. Now, some people are not good for my mental health to keep on my Facebook, but I still do it. I still try to challenge myself and to quote David Goggins, try to callous my mind by seeing the sheer hatred, lunacy, idiocy, whatever you want to call it, that some people put out there without, again, they don't fact check anything. I've done this before with
Right.
some people, and I try to do it politely as possible, but they post whatever story they've posted. And again, it's usually from realinfo.net.org / whatever. And you go and you do a Google and you find out that none of it's factual. It's completely inaccurate.
Right.
And that was the next thing I kind of wanted to get your take on, because I think this is where we're going to go in the near future, because people have such a distaste and distrust for the main media sources, including Fox News, including CNN and all those. How do we continue to balance allowing smaller voices into the room, but also vetting them at the same time? And to illustrate kind of what I mean, there are smaller sources of news that we're not familiar with that do report the truth. However, how do we vet and make sure that they're reporting the truth and not just spewing out a different perspective because it's convenient to their own agenda?
Right. That's a good question. And if somebody has an answer to that, let me know, because they would be genius. I honestly don't know how to answer that. I honestly don't. It's funny because here in New Jersey, it's a little different from Ohio, where we lived for a very long time, in that our news sources come from New York. We only have maybe 1 or 2 stations here in New Jersey, and they're very small, and they're usually not heavily watched. So our local news isn't really so local, unless it's something major, drastic that has happened. But it's generally, focused and from New York news. So, that's very different from, where we lived in Ohio, in that you have news stations pretty much in every regional area of the state. In other words, we lived in Dayton, so we had several news stations in Dayton that covered, probably, let's say, a 70-mile radius outside of the Dayton, Ohio area. And, same thing for Cincinnati and, some of the other larger cities. So we were well informed, or at least in my opinion, well informed about what was going on at any given time in our regional area. And then nationally, we watched the national news, but locally we knew what was going on. Here it's a little different, because you really don't know what's going on unless you subscribe to some of these smaller news outlets that may or may not cover certain things. But we're not privy to, if my neighbor shot his wife across the street, knock on wood, I hope that never ever happens. I happen to like them, but
I'm putting
that's
that
not
out as a hot take. I'm telling everybody that happened, and you're the official news source for this. That's how I'm going to spin this for sure.
We wouldn't know about that. That would not be covered in the news. Now, now with that said, here's something a little funny. I have a neighbor next to me, not the one across the street that potentially could shoot his wife, but the one next to me. And he's like the busybody of the neighborhood. So he knows everything that's going on. So when we want to know something like, oh, the power's out, what's going on? We go over next door to him, because he knows everything. In fact, the neighbor that I joke about, him shooting his wife, but his wife actually went to jail for like a year for embezzlement. Just recently. And so she was gone. We didn't see her. So what do? We go to the neighbor, and he proceeds to tell us the whole story about her situation and getting a year in jail, or like 364 days. So she didn't have to do prison time. So she stayed in county jail. Anyway, so I guess all that said, sometimes it pays to have a nosy neighbor.
Absolutely. It sounds like you live in one of those real housewives of whichever one that she didn't, I think it was New York or something like that. And that just shows you how much my girlfriend's TV watching is seeping into my brain, because I think one of them did go to jail for embezzlement. So I feel like now you're living in that neighborhood, and that's all I'm picturing in my head. So I'm going to need to come over once this pandemic is over and see that pool and all that stuff that I know you got now.
Yeah, Brandon, I wouldn't, hold my breath on that, but you are welcome to come here. I have a house now with extra bedrooms, no pool, but I do have places for you to stay. So actually, I live in Jersey, but I live in the mountains of New Jersey. So I live in the northwest side of the state, and it's actually a lot more peaceful here. I'm from, another county that's very busy and has a lot of cities, and it's right outside of New York, so it's like a little New York. But I moved up here 4 years ago, and it has been very nice and very peaceful.
Well, this is going to be a recurring theme, I feel like, but I'm pretty dumb geographically. So the first thing that I'm learning right now is that New Jersey has mountains. Didn't know, had no idea that New Jersey even had mountains. But to be fair, I never think about what states do other than like Montana, of course. And second, I could not be in an opposite location. I'm in Miami, in the city.
And I am so jealous about that. Thank you very much.
Don't be. It's right around the time that we finally got out to explore, because we came here for my girlfriend to go to the PhD program, and her first couple semesters were just stressful, and there was a lot of work, and so we didn't get to go out much. And then right after that, she's like, all right, I finally hit my stride, and we went out. Literally the day that we went out, I think 2 days after that is when they started shutting everything down. So we haven't really got to go out and explore very much, which is very unfortunate. But at the same time, the weather, you can't beat the weather.
Can't beat it.
Because we lived in Tampa. Right? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
You're in Miami, right?
Correct, yes.
See, I love Miami. I could go to Miami 4 or 5 times a year and be very happy. Okay. In fact, actually, the kids and I used to go quite a bit when they were younger and meet my family. We would make our vacations. We would meet in, usually somewhere in Florida, and Miami was a big hit. So I'm so jealous of you. And if I ever get to Miami, you're going to be the first person I call.
Absolutely. We got the extra bed and everything for a reason. So I'm paying this extra money for it. It might as well get used. So.
Well, yeah. So now we just need to get rid of this whole pandemic, and then maybe we can actually make that happen.
Well, that's the funny part. I think by the time the pandemic completely settles down to the point where people are actually living a real life, we'll be about ready to move out of here probably. But to be fair, also, Miami was the hotbed for the world for their hot minute, because a lot of Miami people were living their life. They were not staying indoors, and they were not shutting down, because obviously you grab yourself a 6-pack, and we live by the water. So people grab a 6-pack and they just go out there and they hang out. Now you've got 40, 50 people, no masks, no anything like that. And we're talking about really in the height of it, when it was, the curve had not gotten flattened at all. And so that's why our curve took so long to actually move.
Yeah. Well, at that time, I really stayed isolated. So that was very difficult for me. The first, I want to say 2 months, and especially here, that's all that was on TV was, 24-hour coronavirus information. And so that was a tough time. And I don't know about there, but, we still don't have like indoor dining. They just opened up outdoor dining. They just opened up, hair salons and barbershops and all of that. And, there's still state agencies and things that have not opened up. So it's been a real challenge in a lot of different ways for us in New Jersey and, in the Northeast in general.
I don't think you're unique there. I think that that's true for the majority of the places that I'm aware of. And here in Florida, or Miami specifically, because that's the other thing. Florida did certain things, and Miami had to do others because our numbers were so high. So we opened up slower than the rest of Florida, and then we actually had to reverse some of the phases that we'd gotten to. We had to shut them back
Mhm.
down. So we did have indoor
Yeah.
dining pretty early on, and then they shut that back down. And it's, I think, getting ready to open back up again. What they did is
Mhm.
they said you could sit outdoors, no
Mhm.
table, no bigger than 6 feet apart, and all that type of stuff. And now I think they're finally getting ready to open up indoor dining again at 25%. I want to say, don't quote me on that,
Yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
finally getting back to open indoor dining. So I'm very interested to see how this all progresses. And to be fair, we haven't indoor dined anywhere other than our house since this whole thing
Yeah.
started. Thank God for DoorDash, Uber Eats, and us cooking again.
Yes, for sure. And let me tell you, if nothing else, I have cooked some fantastic meals in my isolation here. So that's been a good thing that I've experienced in this, because it does, inspire you to cook more. And then on the weekends we'll do, we'll order in or whatever. But I've made some really fantastic meals.
If I say anything else that ages me, this is going to be probably the most damning, in that I've for a long time wanted a food processor, and my girlfriend finally bought me one for my birthday. I mean, I was looking at America's Test Kitchen YouTube videos, like reviewing
Hmm.
food processors and all that stuff. I've never used a food processor in my life. And then even after she got it for me, it took me like probably 2 months before I actually used it or anything. But I
Hmm.
finally started getting into it recently, and that's been the greatest tool for cooking. And I made some really cool stuff over the past couple of weeks, just using that and adding that to the
Hmm.
arsenal. So cooking by far has been one of the good things to come out of the pandemic and spending more time at home. And I just feel lucky to be able to be in a position where that is something I can say. You know what I mean? Not everybody's that lucky with how this whole thing is progressed.
Yes, so true. So true. And
So
I think I'm getting to a point now where I could see my family more, which is nice. The first few months, I couldn't see my grandchild. Ray was not going to have that at all, which I understood. Better safe than sorry. And now I'm starting to see him more, starting to see my parents more. So things are getting better. They're just moving very slowly.
absolutely. I think one of my friends' parents made the news actually, because she gave birth right around right after things shut down. I want to say April timeframe. And so what they
Hmm.
did, they either rented or they owned, I don't recall. But they took an RV anyways and parked it across the street from the hospital, because they weren't allowed in back then. And they had like signs all over the side of the RV saying "Welcome to the world," whatever the baby's name is. I forget off the top of my head right now. And it ended up
Hmm.
making some, I think, CNN or something like that, from St. Petersburg, Florida. And I just thought that was hilarious, how people again are trying to be adaptive and trying to show those same affections that we used to in just a different
Hmm.
manner. Because that's not something I
Hmm.
would have readily thought about. If you told me as a parent that I couldn't go see my grandkid, I'd probably be like, oh, well, it's all right. I'll see him later. But I would not go out and rent an RV and park across the street and make signs. And that says a lot about who I am as a person.
Well, yeah, no, I think I don't know that I would have done that either. So, great minds think alike, I guess.
I'm just lazy. I'm lazy, and I know that baby's going to be here in a couple months when I get a chance to see him. It's just not something that
Hmm.
I grew up, I guess, around, trying to head out as soon as possible to go see it. Because I know what would have happened though. I would have said something like that, and my girlfriend would have been like, "No, we're going," And I'm like, "All right, fine, whatever." And then I'll do it, and I'll get like one of those little 11, letter piece of paper, just like this big, and say they wouldn't be able to see it or anything like that. So I'm not making the news for any of those type of activities for sure.
So let me ask you this, Brandon. Have you had anybody close to you or in your family that's been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? I mean, or have had the virus rather?
I have. I've had family members who have had it. I have also had some work colleagues. Their family members have had it. Some of them have passed away from it. So
Right.
it has affected the people that I would say relatively close to me.
Hmm.
I've been lucky that I personally do not know anyone who's passed away from it. And again, I
Hmm.
count that among the blessings of all this stuff. But um, it's been, like I said, it's scary to get that text message or call, whatever it was. I forget at the time now. And you
Hmm.
just don't know where that's going to go. And you hope particularly because some
Mm-hmm.
of the people that had it were of high risk. You know, they had pre-existing conditions and those type of things too. So you start to
Right.
be concerned with how that's going to turn out. But I guess, again, got lucky and have not seen anybody that I know personally, knocking on wood again, pass away from COVID-19 or any complications due to COVID-19.
Yeah, so we had a very dear family friend. She's almost like, well, she is kind of family. She passed away on Easter
No, I'm sorry to hear
from
that.
coronavirus. And what happened was she had been in the hospital. She had surgery, I believe, on her leg. And then they tested her so that they can transfer her to a not assisted living, but a rehabilitation a center. So she tested negative. They sent her to this center. She was there recuperating, doing well, and they were about to discharge her. And then they tested her. No, I think she got a fever that morning and then tested positive and then died like the same day, which happened to be Easter. That really threw us all for a loop and made me realize how close to home this really is. You know, it's not just some virus or pandemic that's affecting some people. You know, it's really affecting people that I love and care about. And I have seen people sick from it. And I believe my husband and I, we have a friend, two friends that are married that we hang out with sometimes. And I'll never forget that back in December, we went bowling and he was so sick. And he had all the classic symptoms of, you know, the coronavirus. And he firmly believes, and I think we agree, or we do agree, that he probably had it back then. So I think it dates back longer than, you know, to when we actually started calling it or identifying it as an issue.
I'm definitely interested to see if they follow up on those and try to see if they think people did, because the problem is, from the latest research I saw recently, that the antibodies only stay in the system for around 3 months for a lot of people, so up to 6, I think, for others. So your friend's already outside that window. So you can't go back now and do an antibody test on that to find out if they did. Again, given what we know now and given what we have available to us at this moment, maybe they'll find something later that can do that, or maybe we'll find the antibodies do last longer, whatever that ends up being. But I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it was around before we discovered it. That's how most of these things work, right? That we don't know about them, then they blow up, and then we find out they go back a lot farther than we originally thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the case with this. But I'm hoping that, you know, we're looking forward to a brighter 2021. Because, you know, as used to this as I'm getting, I don't want to live like this anymore. You know,
I could probably go, you know, probably another year or so before I really have to start seeing people again. It'd be fine with me. You know, I think I'm just antisocial enough, and I don't know anybody here in Miami that if I have to be completely self-centered, I'll be like, no, extend it. You know, ahead, shut everything down for longer. I got to know where I'm trying to be. I used to have to travel back to Tampa for once a month for work, and that shut that down. I mean, I'm good. I built myself a gaming PC. You know, I downloaded some games. I'm good for a hot minute. So
yeah,
but
I wish I could say the same.
But Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, whatever video streaming service you have, they got to keep working. I need them to keep being out there and keeping it going. Now, if they shut that down, I got to go somewhere.
Yeah, well, I do miss going out to dinner and meeting friends and having a glass of wine with dinner. I do miss that, but I'm actually getting used to it, and I'm okay. I'm okay with myself.
Look, I'll make a recommendation to you that we discovered since the coronavirus and everything hit, because we were going to go for our 3-year anniversary. We were going to go to Sonoma. We're going to go out to Sonoma, you know, the wine country and everything. Obviously, that shut that down. So we were trying to figure out another way to really expand our wine drinking abilities. And so we found a service called Som Select. Oh, man, they are amazing. So they have three different programs. They have one, they send you 4 bottles based around some kind of idea. Some, so far the ones we've had are sparkling wines that aren't champagne,
Mm-hmm.
California grapes that nobody knows about, and just
Mm-hmm.
things. We had one that was rosé, which she just loved. And things like that. And then they have another one that's called the Psalm 6, which is just the sommeliers they have that work for them, their favorite 6 bottles of wine this month that they've been drinking and everything. You'll get some of the bottles. We've got a couple now. We're going to try to age around 10 years, before we drink it, because they give you some aging recommendations on there, like how long you can age them and stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
the final one for, like, if you're really trying to do something, they have Blind 6, which they send you the bottles wrapped in black, like a
Mm-hmm.
black paper or something like that, and you got to taste them and
Mm-hmm.
try to guess the tasting notes, what kind of wine it is, what region it's from and everything. And then they give you a card as well that you can like flip over and see how close you were and all that type of stuff as well. So we've
Oh,
loved it,
wow.
and their customer service is amazing, because we tried one other service around the same time, and they wouldn't get back to you for weeks. They never, like, they're supposed to have some kind of algorithm that guessed what you liked and everything. They never updated our profile. It was just not a good experience at all. But I highly
Mm-hmm.
recommend Som Select. We look forward to getting that box every month for sure.
Awesome. Let me write that down.
Yeah, it's sommselect.com. And there's no referral fees or anything like that, so I don't get anything for telling you about it.
Okay.
But maybe, hey,
Um,
maybe this will get popping, and then they can sponsor me. I'll take that sponsorship all day.
there you go. There you go. And then you can hire me to work for you in sales, and I'll get more sponsorships for you.
I'm down. I'm down for the cause. If I can get wine, I don't think the quality will maintain. Not that there's much quality from me speaking anyways, but I don't think it'll maintain if you start giving me free wine. It's going to be a problem. So,
Well, I wouldn't be mad at that at all.
yeah, I just don't like those nitrate hangovers. So that would be the only downside, of course, if that went that route. But I'm sure I'd
Yeah.
find a way to manage. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, you do. I know
So,
I have.
so since you brought up wine, what is your wine of choice? What do you usually find yourself going to? Not specific to a brand, but like what type?
Cabernet.
You're a cab, okay. And why
I'm
cab?
a cab
What's it do for
drinker.
you?
Uh, I don't know. I think I like the boldness of it,
Mhm.
and a little. I'm probably sounding real ignorant, but like almost a cocoa or coffee type
Mhm.
taste, underlying taste in it. So I don't know. Somebody introduced me to it years ago, and I've been drinking it ever since.
Okay, I'm not mad at that. Cab is definitely one of the broader ranges of wine. It has a lot of different types and everything. So if you were going with a wine, that'd probably be the safest one, because you could go so many different ways with it. Um,
Yes.
this year we discovered, I think it was this year, it might have been last year. Yeah, it was probably last year actually, when we actually were in Italy. We discovered Brunellos, and oh man, I have not had a bad Brunello yet, and I'd never even heard of that type of wine until recently. But man, Brunellos are amazing.
Wow. Is that red?
Yes, yes. It's
Okay.
a Italian red. And I'm not gonna lie, one of the main reasons we selected the apartment building we did is because they have a store
Hmm.
on the first floor that has just tons of wine, and like good quality wine, and not the prices are comparative to where you would get it at another store, including liquor stores, and cheaper actually than a lot of liquor stores around here. And they have these amazing Brunellos, and we were like, we're gonna wait for some reason to celebrate, and I don't remember what we were celebrating anymore, but
Mm.
we got one of the Brunellos, and oh man, never looked back. It's just an amazing type of wine. It's my favorite of the moment. But I used to, for many years, I used to drink Sangiovese, which is another Italian red.
Okay. Well, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think trying wine is probably one of the best experiences, but the problem is, unlike trying a beer, you got a lot more wine if you don't like it. That's a big, you got to commit.
Right.
So
That becomes a problem. Interesting fact, there are wineries in New Jersey.
I, I want to talk so much crap about New Jersey, because I got other friends who are from New Jersey, and it's just fun to, but no, I mean, that is interesting. I wonder, do you know what kind of wines they primarily make? Is it cab?
No.
Okay.
I think it's all types, and quite frankly, I've been to a couple of wine tasting events,
Hmm.
and some of them I find the wines to be terrible. But um, they make a good sangria.
Yeah. I want to say it's shocking to me that New Jersey wine wouldn't be the top quality producer. I would expect nothing less from the great state of Jersey. Garden state and wine. That's what you think of, right? When you think of Jersey.
Yeah, right. Well, there is one. It's called Jersey. I think it's called Jersey or Jersey something, and that's pretty good. And I don't like white wine, but I like their white wine. So there are some, but there are, in my opinion, a lot more that I don't like. Um, so yeah, but anyway, that's an interesting fact. People don't, think about wineries in New Jersey, but they're here.
There's wineries here in Florida as well, and I have no intention to ever try them. Now, the breweries in Florida are good. You can get
Uh-huh.
good beer in Florida, particularly Cigar City in Tampa. Amazing.
Mhm.
But I'm not trying to drink any Florida wine. And maybe that's biased of me, but I'm cool with being biased sometimes. That's fine. I don't need Florida man and Florida woman making my wine. That's not somewhere I'm trying to go.
All right, I hear you. I hear you.
So have you heard any good Florida man stories? I know, again, for people who don't live here, because I've lived here now for just crossed 10 years. Yeah, it'll actually be 10 years in a couple of days. But what is your favorite Florida man story that you're aware of? We got the face-eating zombie. We got some good ones out there.
Florida man, I don't even know what that is.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
I'm serious.
So Florida man is, oh man, I don't even know how
Brandon,
to
you know
explain it.
how old I am, don't you?
But again,
Okay.
all it is that there's a lot of crazy stories that come out of Florida. And for whatever
Mhm.
reason, newscasters used to start with Florida man does X. And it was always something nuts or crazy. And so people started collecting them on the internet and starting all the Florida man stories. And so, you got Florida man gets arrested for trying to buy beer with a gator. Florida man eats another man's face. Oh man, there's just so many. Just type in Florida man and then any date or anything like that, and you'll see. They're nuts. They're absolutely insane.
Oh Lord. Okay, now you got me doing something for in my pastime, which I don't have a lot of, but I'll find a way.
It's a good way to add levity to the situation, particularly because you live in Jersey and you don't live in Florida. And if you live in Florida, it can actually be a little bit scary sometimes because sometimes they get a little bit close. You're like, wait, I know where that's at. I need not to go back over there maybe for a little bit of time. But with you being in Jersey, you're like, man, just have your Jersey wine and take a good deep laugh at the people in Florida and all the nonsense we get into.
I will certainly do that for sure.
All
Florida
right.
man, that's too funny.
All right, so let's circle back around to your business. Tell me a little bit more about that. It sounds like you're doing a little bit of business consulting and everything. How'd you get started in that?
Well, so when I was at my last job, I was miserable. I literally um, did not enjoy anything about it. And I started to think, I need to start to get back to what I know and what I enjoy doing, and that's grant writing. So I basically created a plan. I lost that job last year, and that gave me the motivation um, to really start to build my business. And it also gave me the time to do it as well. So that's what I did. And now I am enjoying life. I'm enjoying work. Um, I have creative freedom, which is always nice. And I'm back to, grant writing, which is what I love to do. And graphic design and things like that, I also enjoy. But grant writing is really what I love to do. And I do a good job at it. So I kind of I circled back around. So my career in grant writing started in Ohio. And from that point on, I did have other careers, but when I moved back to New Jersey, I became a grant writer for a very wonderful organization called Eva's Village. And I just really enjoyed the work. So since leaving in Eva's Village, I've done other jobs and I've been in grant writing. But my last job, I was in a recruitment situation where I was responsible for recruiting volunteers. And that just isn't what I do. And it isn't what I enjoy doing. So, again, after losing that job and, just having the time to really put my thoughts on paper and decide what I want to do, where I want to go with this, that just gave me the motivation to do it. And I'm so happy I did, especially at this time where things are so uncertain, like I said, it somewhat created opportunities for my business. Although I would prefer not to have had the pandemic, provide me that opportunity. But yeah, so it's been wonderful. My business is growing slowly but surely. It's not even been a year, and it officially became a registered business in July of 2020. So yeah, it's really working out. It's not easy, of course, but it's definitely rewarding. And I'm working with a lot of great nonprofit organizations that are doing really phenomenal work in their communities and throughout the nation. And so it's really nice to be a part of that.
That's awesome. I did, prior to this, I did go and I checked out your website and just looked over some of the stuff that you have there. Did you use a website creator? Did you hire someone to do that? How did you get that started?
I basically went through GoDaddy.
Gotcha.
So I, somewhat did it myself, and it's still a work in progress, but, they pretty much give you everything you need to build the website, and then they host it. And so that made it easy because as far as that type of technology, I'm so far from being sophisticated that it's not even funny. But I've learned a lot since doing this and developing my own site. So, yeah.
So did you have the site set up before the pandemic kind of got going, or did you already have, or did you do it after?
I did have the site up.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have nearly the information that it has now, but I did have it up, and then I took it down for a little bit so that I can kind of reorganize and restructure. And then during the pandemic, I redid it, and that's what you see now. And again, it's still a work in progress, but yeah.
You had the business prior to the pandemic. Let's dive into where go into now working in what's largely a digital environment and a digital business. How was that pivot for you? Did you find it difficult in the beginning, or it seems like it actually picked up a little bit when the pandemic got going for you, as you mentioned earlier? So I just want to know how that pivot was for you, and if there was anything that you kind of had to learn on the fly.
Ooh, I'm still learning things on the fly, Brandon. I learn things on the fly every day with my business. Yeah, so I kind of, how do I want to put this? It just kind of evolved. When the pandemic hit, I take that back. I was very busy in January, and even February. Then March hit and things began to slow between March and April, and then they picked up again over the summer. But I also had to redirect my focus on the clientele I really wanted to work with. And I really wanted to work with those nonprofit organizations that do not currently have a lot of grant funding. Like, for example, one organization I'm working with, they have been solely funded by the local government for their 40-year existence. Or is it 50-year, 40 or 50? And now, with the pandemic, things are going to start to change. The government's not going to have that amount of money that they probably had in 2019 and years prior. Things are going to change, and people have to these organizations need to start diversifying their funding. So I'm happy to kind of come in on the ground level and help them to acquire grant funding that they never had before other than that local government. So that will enable them to do more, to help more of those in need, and really help to advance their mission in a meaningful way.
Now, are you expecting to kind of dry up as the financial impacts of this pandemic hit the government? I know that since it is basically free money in a lot of ways, obviously it's competitive, but it is somewhat free money. I just wonder how the financial outlook for the grant industry is.
Well, that remains to be seen, and we're all trying to figure that out. Um, I One thing I can say that I've seen is a jump in, or let me put it like this: funding agencies have been very responsive to the pandemic in that they have, either accepted proposals on a rolling basis, where maybe the year before they accepted it once a year or twice a year. Some of them are speeding up the process, the approval process, and the awarding process, where a foundation might have taken, 4 months to give you the grant money. Now it's taking like 30 to 45 days. So there are those good changes that have happened in response to the pandemic. I don't know how it's going to be in the future. Personally, I think this is going to be a 5-year recovery for at least this country, right? And I think, or I hope, that these funding agencies will continue to step up to the plate, because organizations can't function without that support. What they typically did in the past to fundraise, they're not able to do anymore. Or if they're able to do it, but in a very different way. So they're struggling, trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we make this work? How do we raise $150,000 from a gala when, you can't be there face to face and have a silent auction, for example? So there's going to be a lot of change, and I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that funders, both private and public, will continue to rise to the occasion.
Do you think, so you touched on there just some of the concerns you have with how they have to pivot again to a non-in-person gala and things like that. But I wonder how you think this is going to look over the course of this recovery, because for my own prediction, not having any inside information or anything about this, but it does look like we are headed for a correction in the stock market and potentially the economy, and potentially that'll have ripples to a lot of other industries. So I'm just wondering, do you worry about the donors getting a little bit tighter with their wallets as we entered into a phase potentially of tighter spending, and so which also would mean probably tighter donations as well?
So the answer to that is yes, particularly with individual giving, right? Because we're all being impacted. A good portion of people have, lost their job, or they've had to, change their spending habits because they don't have the same income coming in. There are going to be some changes and tightening of the wallets with respect to individual giving. Like I said, and I believe in the government as well, because, well, obviously, we're doing all these stimulus things and helping out state governments and such. It's kind of like, where's the money going to come from? At some point, there's going to be a tightening of the wallet. So I guess the answer is yes. I do foresee that potentially being a problem, and that's where I'm hoping that other sources like the private sector will help to help bridge that gap for these nonprofit organizations.
Without seeing this as an attempt to announce your age again or anything like that, were you in this arena back when the 2008 financial crisis happened, or were you in a different arena then?
I was in a different arena. Actually, I was a real estate agent, and that's when I moved back to New Jersey. Okay. So I was a product, or I felt the burn of that recession. I couldn't find a job, whereas prior to that, I could, kind of find employment like that. But it took me a while, and when I did find employment, it was in grant writing.
Okay. And one of the reasons I was asking, and obviously I don't know that you'll be able to answer this now, but I was kind of wondering, had you experienced it in that financial recession and seeing what it was like then, and if you're predicting something like that again, or if you think it'll be different again because the conditions of this one obviously are different. We're not seeing a housing bubble burst. We're seeing more so a global recession based upon people not being able to go out and earn a living or spend as they normally would, and our economy is basically being built around that consumerism.
I think it is very much the same, and a bit different in that, this pandemic is really something different, right? Um, yeah, I don't even know how to answer that. I can just tell you that I I believe that it's going to be a longer recovery than what we experienced in 2008, and it's going to be a more difficult recovery. That's my prediction.
So
I'm not an expert, but
just bringing the optimism with all this right now. Everybody should feel really good after hearing you say things like that.
no, I want to be more optimistic, but I also believe in telling you the truth. So that's what my concern is, and what terrifies me actually.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's legitimate. I know I was joking before, but I'm not by any means thinking that's a pessimistic view. I think that's a very realistic view. And there's been calls from many of the financial experts this entire year saying the stock market has become uncoupled from reality. And we know what happens when the stock market crashes. We know that again has ripples throughout everything. We know that the Fed has basically been printing money for a lot of the year as well, and that can't continue for much longer. We know that we're seeing some historic unemployment numbers. We know that we don't have the normal consumerism that we do. I know from a personal perspective as well, the interest rate has gone down, and so the savings rate has gone down. So they're in a state of actively trying to encourage people to spend, which is generally what they do when the economy shrinks. So I do have a lot of concerns, because in the midst of everything that's going on, we're also seeing the stock market go higher than it ever has before. And that doesn't make sense. And those two factors should not be going on simultaneously. And so that makes me concerned for what's going to come in the near future, because again, those are exactly the type of situations you see when a bubble bursts, when the dot-com bubble burst, when the 2008 housing bubble burst. Bubbles burst based upon reality and the economy not being in sync, or peace in the economy, let's say, because as it's been screamed at me by many of the personal financial writers I follow on Twitter, the stock market is not the economy, no matter how much we say it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And and we have an election coming up, and that always affects the stock market.
Correct.
Even in a small way, it's definitely going to, no matter what happens in this upcoming election, I think there's going to be an effect to the stock market, and that scares me.
Well, and that's interesting to me, because again, taking a slightly optimistic, even though it's still a bad thing long term, because the stock market is so inflated right now, that downturn around the election time may actually be somewhat insulated because of that. Now, my fear is, and they've been saying this for a while, especially with the rise of Robinhood, there is a lot of inexperienced investors. And let me say something, because I got into trouble for saying that phrase before in a conversation with somebody. That is not meant to be a diss to anyone. It's not meant to be a detrimental phrase about your experience. It's just simply that you're investing and you're early in your investing career. That's all that means. In experienced investors, it basically means that they just don't have a lot of experience and they haven't invested for very long. And so that's a lot of people who are driving this. And the reason that's important is, if we do start to see those corrections, that's going to start a sell-off. And if there are a lot of the people who've been pushing the market as high as it has, they're not all of them, because they just don't have the money or the economic power to do that, then you're going to start to see a real recession, a real correction. And because these people are inexperienced, they're not used to those type of downturns. They're used to the climb, and it's going to start a sell-off, and we're going to shoot down to the bottom. So I'm hopeful in that because we're so high and inflated right now, that we'll be somewhat insulated from the normal presidential downturn. But I am also fearful of that once a downturn comes, which is normal around presidential elections, as you just said, that the people who don't know that and haven't seen that before get scared and start selling like crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yeah, there's just so much uncertainty right now in a lot of different areas, and we just touched on a few.
I think, not to take the position of a nihilist or anything like that, but the world is chaos, and learning to manage that and find out how you live in that is really, I think, one of the ways to remain happy and optimistic. Because again, once you know that fact, you can kind of deal with that fact. But I think a lot of people have this sense that the world is a series of rules, a series of things that have to happen. And it's just simply not the case. Things just happen all the time, and you just have to ride that wave and hope that it happens in your favor. And if it doesn't, adjust and keep moving on best you can.
Yeah,
That's, again, my
absolutely.
perspective. So
I totally agree.
that's no fun. This is never going to be interesting to watch if you don't disagree with me and we don't start a vehement argument about something. You know what I mean? So we can dive into sports. We can dive into anything that'll just really get your blood boiling and going. But you're drinking wine right now, so it might take a little bit longer.
Exactly. Nothing's going to get my blood boiling at this point.
Well, let me send you a bottle of whiskey and we do this whole thing, because I think whiskey can get that attitude out.
It can. Definitely. A little bit of Jack, for sure.
Oh,
you won't know what'll come out. Who knows what'll come out of my mouth then?
So that, again, we'll do that on episode the next time you come back on, because we'll have to do this again for sure.
Awesome. I would like to.
Outstanding. So before we go, I've been starting this again. This isn't very experienced or anything like that. I haven't been doing it a long time, but I'm trying to ask people, if when I put this episode up, what do you think your tagline should be?
Oh.
While you're thinking, I want to say this for anybody who may see this, and this is a direct ripoff of Dace Samaro. They ask people for rainbows and their neon signs and things like that. I'm absolutely stealing that core concept because I think it conceptualizes what people think of what they've said over the past hour or whatever it is.
Brandon, you stumped me with that one. What should my tagline be? I'm thinking back to the Real Housewives, but I don't think they do their own tagline. So
I hope they do, because those things are so stupid. If they don't write them, somebody's getting paid for writing. I'm in the wrong career for sure.
I definitely think that somebody's writing it for them. I could be wrong, but I definitely think they are. Man, what would my tagline be? Staying sane through a global pandemic? I don't know.
We'll go with that. We would definitely go with
trying to keep mentally healthy during a global pandemic, trying not to, kill my husband during a global pandemic, the normal stuff,
Look,
and not to try to get too annoyed.
you talked earlier about your neighbor shooting her husband, and now you're mentioning you trying not to kill your husband. I'm just saying, if the court comes and asks for this tape, it might get lost, it might not. I don't know. We'll have to see, but that's not looking good for you right now.
Come on, Brandon. We've known each other for a long time now, okay? You got to lose the recording if, the law comes after me now.
I've been telling people this for years. I've been telling people this for years, and I think that they don't think I'm serious. I'm a gold digger. If they offer me money, I'm going to sell anybody I know out, for sure. I'm selling everybody out.
Fair enough. I appreciate the honesty.
Well, I don't want them to do a documentary and people are like, I can't believe he sold me out. You should have known. I told you. You should definitely know I'm going to sell you out. I don't want to hear I didn't know. We had no idea. That's because you don't listen. And that's exactly why I sold you out.
Well, in all fairness, I would never harm my husband because I love him to pieces. So
yeah. That doesn't sound like you're covering up now.
No, seriously. He is my best friend. I don't know if you know this, but we were high school sweethearts.
I did not know that.
And we reconnected after, 30 years. He got married, I got married and divorced, and we both had kids, with other, our spouse, our exes. And then we kind of double backed, kind of reconnected, and here we are 11 years later, and we're married.
That is romantic as all crap, but for me, it seems super scary because I have no intentions of breaking up with my girlfriend by any means. I'm just saying that if something happened down the line, I don't want to marry anybody I went to high school with. I can't see a single person I went to high school with being somehow my soulmate. And that just scares the crap out of me. Whenever I hear people say about that, and I'm like, I'm very happy for you. That sounds like an epic love poem and that type of stuff. But I know who I went to high school with, and I know what they know about me. So I just can't see it being anything other than us settling. I think if I marry somebody from high school, it's certainly me and them looking at it like, we ain't gonna do nothing else. Come on. That's it. That's all that's gonna be. I can't see my love story ending that way for sure.
Well, that means that you have your soulmate now.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. And we didn't go to high school together at all. We went to different high schools together, but that's it. So, all right, Cyndi. Well, thank you very much for joining me and having this great conversation.
You're welcome.
It was great to catch up.
Welcome.
We haven't, again, like I said, we haven't talked in like 15 years, and let's make sure that we don't let it go another 15 years before that happens again. So,
okay. And I'll come back anytime you want me to. And I will be emailing you with, some people that I know.
Give me people you don't like. I want to terrorize them. I want to go in on somebody and they're like, why'd you send me that? I'm like, now you know. I don't like you. He said all the things I would say. So
I'll work on that because I know some really obnoxious people, Brandon, okay?
Outstanding.
I can make that happen, for sure.
I love it. I'm in the business of Jerry Springer and I need clicks. Let's do this.
All right. Awesome.
All right. Take care. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. You too.
Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought by leaving a comment below. If you want to check out more Starting Nowhere, make sure to subscribe and check us out on Twitter on twitter.com/startingnowhere. See you next time.